Thank you, Michael. Thanks so much for having me, and thank you all of you for coming. I'm really flattered that you would come and listen to this. Basically me talk about my work, which is so personal. So I think I'm going to I can share my screen, right, Michael? Can I share my
Yes.
screen?
Yep.
Okay. So usually what I do is, so anyway, again, thank you all for coming. It's really nice to see you all. Um, Usually what I like to do is to kind of show all of my work, kind of all of a piece, because it tends to be kind of in context like that, it tends to be kind of easier to understand. But since this is a half an hour and it's specifically about the book, I'm going to mostly concentrate on the book, but I'm going to give you just a little bit of background so you kind of get an idea of the context a little bit. So I think the first thing that I'm not sure people always understand about my work is that it does come from a very personal place. Um, I mostly do portraiture, if you don't know my work, and I see the work as a kind of a dance between me and the model. It's very much about what happens between us. Not so much actually about the final image, but it's about when you see the final image, about feeling that dance that happened between us. And I think if you look closely at my work kind of over the years, I mean, I've been working since like 1984. So it's been, like over, well, it's been a long time, 35, I don't know, a long time. And it's a kind of a transcript of my inner mind, like over the years, like each separate project, they're all connected by one thing or another, but they're all kind of connected by this way of kind of, I've been documenting, I think, my sort of my unconscious, like the things about myself that I wasn't able to speak as a child. I think making this work has been my way of speaking, of speaking things that I really never could say as a child. I also see my work, it feels very much like an act of defiance. It's something that I really wasn't supposed to talk about. And I've sort of been finally kind of coming to a place where I can speak about it. So basically, it's like giving voice to things I couldn't say as a kid, as a girl. And that's, partially why I focus so much on women, even though I think that the things that I talk about are really very universal, and they really relate to both men and women. They relate to anybody, really, to anybody who's human. And also just to clarify, when I say it's sort of a transcript of my inner mind, I think it's not like my day-to-day reality. This is not like the day-to-day life that I live. It's really looking at my unconscious, at the things that that happened, that I felt since I was very young, and that have just have these vestiges, and how we all carry around these vestiges of childhood. And I'm really kind of digging very, very deep and going back and trying to kind of understand and deal with, these old feelings. I dredge them up when I photograph. Like when I'm looking at someone, I'm really working, it's like we're working together, and I'm channeling all kinds of old stuff. So just a quick sort of beginning, I'm going to start just to sort of show you, I worked in black and white for 20 years. I've been doing portraiture forever. And and I started photographing my children when they were young. And I look now, I don't work very specifically, I don't know what I'm doing so much. I'm kind of channeling stuff, but I'm feeling through everything. I'm feeling through all the series and through all the pictures. And so I look back now at things that I really didn't understand at the time. This is back from the 90s. And I see that a lot of the issues have sort of remained, kind of still, they're still in my work. So for instance, this idea of closed eyes, of not looking at certain things, of just kind of closing our eyes to certain things that are going on. And this idea, I think, of falling, of not sort of feeling particularly grounded. The other thing that's always been very, very important in my work is this notion of clarity and of structure and of logic and of understanding exactly where things are, of trying to make sense out of chaos. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, maybe that's what artists do. Like we try to make sense out of the kind of chaos that we, whatever the kind of chaos that we felt in our lives. And this one I think is kind of interesting. It's called Icarus. This one's from 1996, from a series I call the Brazil series. Icarus is that story of the Greek story, which I happen to be Greek, so the myths are kind of part of my life, but mythology. But Icarus was the boy who flew too close to the sun, and that whole notion of like, flying so high that the fear of failure. And I actually added that image today because it goes right into the next body of work, which was the Mark of Abel. And the Mark of Abel actually is a text. It was a quote by Diane Arbus. She called it the Mark of Abel because what she was talking about was the Cain and Abel and the brother who came, and his favorite brother, but he got killed, I guess, because he brought the favorite prize. Something, basically, I don't remember exactly the story, but at the moment. But what she was discussing was the fear of success. The notion that she said, and it was in a quote at the show at the Metropolitan about, well, the year I did this, the year I started this work, which was 2005. So it was at the Met, and she had a quote that said, remember she had done that series of images for her Guggenheim. She won a Guggenheim on a series of pictures of winners. And she said in this quote, it was written in the exhibit, she said something about it's very scary to feel very successful because the fear of falling is so much greater. And that was actually where I got the title from, though it also refers to, for me, like complicated family relationships. And that was when I started this series here that I called the Mark of Abel, and it was about families, and I just started observing. I would invite families, this one happens to be my own family, but I would invite people in different family groups, and I would watch them. I think that's been something that has always fascinated me, like relationships, like people and people in relationships, family dynamics, and the mind, like how we work things out in our minds. And along with that comes like this notion of how we come to understand where we've come from and how we move forward. So I'm interested in sort of self-awareness, in change, and how we can make changes for ourselves. And so for many years, this one I think is 2011. For many years, I photographed people in relationships, and I would just watch. I've always been an observer. I've always been someone who just really, it's not that I'm not talkative, because I actually am, but I also am a really very, very interested in watching. And when I get behind a camera, like something very fascinating happens. I see sort of such different kinds of things when I'm looking through the lens. And while I see things about my models, I'm also trying to understand things about myself. And so all of my work is ultimately trying to understand me, try to understand others, and try to understand everything. I think that, like, I have this huge curiosity about trying to understand like how things function, how people function in the world, how we do what we do, why we do what we do, and how we get through, how we evolve. And so looking, observing in stillness is something that is a large part of my photography, a large part of my work. And trying to say in nonverbal terms a lot of the things, trying to express, I guess, in nonverbal terms, things that I really couldn't say as a girl. I think part of this comes from, the pictures are, I think, on the one hand, very beautiful, but they're also always kind of a little uncomfortable. And that's very, that is a very conscious part of what I do. Partially, I think it's because they look back at the viewer in such a, like they look back so clearly. They don't, that's, I think, one of the differences about my work, that it's not, like there's no, especially when you're seeing them in person, you can't really look at them passively. Like you have to, it's very hard to look at one of my images passively, especially when they're large. You know, they're sometimes like bigger than life size, the faces, and they really look back and they really kind of challenge the viewer. The viewer, oh, like often I've heard viewers say, like, you know, they were kind of like difficult to approach and also very, very hard to walk away from. They kind of do this thing where you're kind of caught in there and you're kind of, it's about like, I feel like what I want the viewer to take out of it is a sense of like looking at themselves, you know, trying to kind of think about themselves. Because and I think the other thing that I'm doing in these works is kind of like changing the sort of inherent power relation in photography. I mean, portrait photography is so much about power relations. There's always the viewer, I mean, the author, the photographer, and then there's the model. And as photographer, you know, you have all the power, and as viewers, we go and watch, we go to see a photograph, but we're watching, like we're just looking at this image. We're looking at the person in the image. But I think that's the piece that sort of changes in my work. I think that that's where that power relationship gets kind of mixed up, and they actually do have this very penetrating stare that ends up looking back. And that is relevant because I think it's one of the ways that we are able to kind of understand ourselves, if we kind of sit with ourselves and really think about, you know, who we are, and really try to understand who we are, you know, rather than just like moving all the time. If you can sit and really understand what goes on the inside, it's I think it's how change happens. So I wanted to show you this. This is starting the Sleeping Beauty series. Again, it's about looking, and it's about looking at one another like deeply and carefully and quietly. And even the notion that that becomes uncomfortable for us to be able to just look at someone. When I do these videos with somebody, you know, I'm not actually behind the camera, I'm just watching her. I just turn the video on, and you know, it's really kind of an unnerving experience, which I suspect is also unnerving for the viewer. But trying to get at the things that we don't talk about. Trying to get at what sort of sits beneath the surface of the masks that we put on like day to day. Because I think the world is so much about like how we, you know, present, and yet the deepest part of us is the part that we don't generally present. And I'd like to show these videos like large, you know, on a wall, projected on the wall, like when I show the Sleeping Beauty images. I think I'm going to just move her on. So here we are, you know, down to the Sleeping Beauty, work. So each body of work, each project that I make is like a different, has a slightly different focus. It's all about evolution. It's all about change. It really all comes from different issues that I try to think about from my own, you know, from my own past. So Sleeping Beauty is very much about how we evolve. And so what I did was, and it wasn't very, I didn't specifically consciously go out and say, okay, I'm going to have them on the ground, and then they're going to be looking at us, and they're going to be in this kind of stage of like, kind of in between, you know, both vulnerable and like looking back at the viewer so intently that there's this odd kind of discomfort, this odd kind of contradiction in the images, the vulnerability and the kind of wariness that they all seem to have. I didn't do it deliberately, but I think that that's kind of what happened. I basically take an image, and then I, you know, if I like, when I'm starting a new series, and if I like it, I, you know, I keep going. And if it's fun, really, like if it feels like it really fits, I just keep doing it. So I called it Sleeping Beauty because it's the reverse of the fairy tale that we've all been taught, that, you know, it's all about the Sleeping Beauty, was all about the princess and the beautiful woman who was passive, and she waited for the kiss from the prince. And so what I did was I reversed it. And so that now that she is lying down in this very vulnerable state, or somewhat vulnerable state, but it's also somewhat Edenic. And she is not waiting, like she's in the process of understanding like what's going on with her so she can get up by herself. So she's not waiting for this kiss from the stranger. And so I see the work as this reverse fairy tale, and I see it as very much about like our inner strengths, and how when we come to understand our inner strengths, we can basically wake up or get up and move forward on our own. And the discomfort, I think, is relevant because it really is somewhat uncomfortable to sort of look at our own foibles and look at, what are the things that, we need to kind of look at and face so that we can move forward. And I think that's one of the things that seems to kind of carry forth in all of my work is this idea of that my models tend to be observers themselves, not so much observed, but observers, like really actively looking back in a maybe uncomfortable way, but very actively looking back at the viewer. Here's another one of the videos. What I'm trying to create, I think, in retrospect, is that sense of discomfort. Like she's uncomfortable in a way because she may, whatever hurts. I mean, I don't mean her. The images are not about the models. The models are simply models for me. They really are sort of stand-ins. I mean, I think all portraiture on some level is a stand-in for the author. But, I'm creating this sort of, especially with the videos, they kind of take that very still image that I make, the whole notion about looking and stillness, and kind of activate it just a little bit and kind of add this little bit of discomfort, the discomfort of change, the discomfort of knowing, the discomfort of what it might feel like to be in like a position where you need to kind of say, I need to get out of this position. Kind of combining, sort of thinking about like systems of oppression, whether they're psychological or cultural or political or social. And the work, one of the things about my work that's really important is that they're not about the individual images. The power from these works is when you see them all, like the most powerful way to see my work is to see them live, large, and together. Like in a room when you're surrounded by all these women, the effect is actually very strong and different from seeing them, like say on my website or even seeing them like this. So here is the book. This is a picture of the book, except that the cover is actually, the white cover is actually satin, which somehow doesn't seem to show through here. It's actually a very beautiful book. So I think it might be 12 by 10. I think that's what it is. And there's a text by Marina Chao. She's a curator that she wrote this very interesting, really very beautiful text. That she kind of pulls all of my work together. Like she looks at it from the Mark of Abel on, and she really pulls my work together she speaks very beautifully about the work. And Maggie Jones is a journalist for the New York Times Magazine, and she writes more of a personal story about like moving forward, how we move on. And Monet is the model, in fact, on the cover, and she wrote a poem. So the other thing about this book, I'll get to that in a minute, but the other thing about this book is that the book is by MW Editions, and Takaki Matsumoto is the designer, and he's extremely, I don't want to say genius, but I mean, he's really good. And he came up with this beautiful design. The book sort of mimics a book of fairy tales. And the way he wrote, like, I remember when he first showed me the text, and I was like, yeah, it's nice. I'm like, but your letters are kind of crooked. He's like, yeah. Referring to kind of a dream state. And like, even in the cartoons, those cartoon bubbles that say Z, 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 like in the cartoon, the Z's kind of start to separate. And so there's this reference to sort of the dream state. But then when you, and the fairy tales, and then he designed the book so that it kind of looks like a fairy tale book. It's almost like a book of fairy tales. It's quite lovely. I don't think my slides do it justice because the text isn't quite this dark. But then there's the poem by the woman who's on the cover, and she's actually a really long-standing friend of mine, and she's a hairdresser by day and she's a poet by night, and she wrote this really beautiful poem, which I loved including it because it kind of includes like the voices of these women. And then just a few spreads. Some of the spreads are singles, and then some of them are doubles. And this is my last piece. I just did a quick little video. I think you could see maybe the satin cover a little bit easier on this one. Oh, so the other thing he did, so then he's got that dreamscape, the way he wrote Sleeping Beauty on the cover. And then what's kind of fascinating was he ended up, we were talking about how to like put the women, like the order to make these, to put the pictures together. And he ended up working them out. He wrote them in alphabetically. So there's this like logical sort of structure to the book. So there's like that kind of dream idea on the cover. And then there's this like logical structure. It's almost like logic over chaos, sort of like you know, like a dream state, or like coming and understanding, you know, your past so that you can kind of move forward. And that's my talk. I guess I should stop my share, or should I leave it on here? Michael, we can't hear you.
No, you can either leave it on or take it off, Lydia. It doesn't matter. Anybody have any questions for Lydia? Okay.
Wait,
So we were, somebody started there. Maybe not.
yeah, no. Can I speak?
Yes, please.
Hi, sorry, I was doing a raised hand thing, which is crazy. Hi, Lydia. Hello,
Hi,
everyone.
Kathleen.
Nice to see you. Yeah, the book's beautiful. I'm curious, just, you know, I mean, I know the work, but I listened to you talk. I wondered, because I am really drawn into that sense of calm of this state of intense staring. And I'm just, from a practical sense, how long is that interaction? Your relationship, sitting in front with your subject lying in front of you or sitting in front of you, how long is that exchange to build that quiet? And do you give a directive about stillness?
You know, the timing varies, and like it's interesting because it's the longer I make photographs, you know, the more years I make photographs, the longer I hold them. It used to be like with the Mark of Abel, like literally that group would come and would leave within 45 minutes. It was, you know, like we would shoot for half an hour maybe. But as I've gotten more confident, it's gotten longer and longer. And so with the Sleeping Beauty, I would say we probably shot for about an hour. I don't really say much. I mean, I talk, but not a lot, you know, because I really need to concentrate. But I don't tell them what to do. The only thing I ask them is that they, like, sometimes they say to me, first of all, when I ask them if they want to if they'll post for me, or sometimes they ask me, I always say, you know, just make sure that you've gone on my website so you can see what I'm doing, because, you know, I don't want to like surprise you. I'm not, you know, making like pictures. I'm not being flattering. These are not like, I'm not saying they're unflattering, but then I'm not, you know, this is not Sears.
Right.
Like, I'm not here to like do something that, you know, is like flattering or pleasing. I mean, that's not what I'm trying to do here. And so they're like, yeah, that's fine. So they know when they come to my house, like they already know. And that's the other thing, you know, I make all the work at my property. So it really does speak to family. And family relationships and where we come from and how we grow out of and move forward from like whatever, like we've like, however we've like moved on, how we've evolved. But I talk enough that we are very comfortable. And I think that the work does speak to this trust level that we have. Like we really just kind of see each other. I sometimes think about the way I work as like kind of like the good mother. There's this sense that I am very, very attentive. And in watching them, they almost always say to me, that was like so fascinating. And it felt so good because I'm just watching. Like I'm not asking them to do anything. I'm not asking them to be models, because I'm not bringing in like women who are models. I'm not interested in someone who wants to like model, like, like model.
Right.
I'm asking them to just be themselves. And I ask them to just like really just be themselves and just let go. It doesn't take long for them to let go because I don't know, because we just always like each other. Not that I always know them very well, but there's this beautiful connection that happens between us. And I'm very, very attentive to them and they feel that. And in that feeling, what I'm doing is I feel like I'm sort of redoing like all this, like I am, because, and I did this with my students too, when I used to teach, it would be like, I was there to make them feel good. And in that process, like we both get seen. And in that process, like I get seen too. And so we both sort of leave this situation, like both feeling very, very seen and very, very, I always say I kind of like fall in love with them after I photograph them because I'm so connected. I see something in them that I usually see something that I can like relate to. So did that answer your question, Kathleen?
Oh yeah, sure, it does. It's just particularly interesting because there's kind of a universal state of calm that is enfolding everyone, and everyone achieves it. So I was wondering, how do they get there? And it's kind of fascinating because it's like you could have the whole lawn full of all these women at the same time, and they're in the same ecosystem. So
it's what happens between us. It is this beautiful rapport that happens. We just, I don't want to say they fall in love with me, but they like the process. They always feel like they've been seen. They are like, often they say to me, it was just like being in a shrink's office. It was really, especially the ones that are inside and they're sitting in my studio, but they feel like they've just sat there and been seen. And that is such an important piece of humanity, like that's what we all want, to like be seen. And that's kind of what happens. And so I feel like a lot of my work is so much about the gesture. It's not about like, I don't ask them, like these kids nowadays who are like, they have to be the star of the basketball team and they have to have straight A's and they have to do all these things because parents want to be proud and they want their kid, that whole sort of double thing. And like, that's the opposite of what I do. I really am not asking them to like do something. I'm not asking them to perform. I'm not asking them to do something that will make me a good picture. I'm just asking them to be. I feel very much like I impose upon them if I ask them to do weird things. And I know people like to do weird things, but I'm not in the least bit interested in asking them to do it. It doesn't feel good to me.
Thank you.
It is about being seen for both of us, I think. Yeah. I see Daryl Ann, I think maybe has her hand up.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Thanks. It's so obnoxious in a way, but let me take it down anyway for now. So hi, I really appreciated seeing and hearing you talk about your work. So because it's so personal, I guess my question is sort of a personal one. And what I wondered is, because I relate strongly to your desire to explore something that you're also trying to reveal to yourself through the work. And this idea of addressing maybe certain things in childhood and that kind of idea. And I wondered, when you're doing this particular series, say Sleeping Beauty, and I find that, sometimes we work on a series and there's overlap between when we feel like we've resolved whatever it is we're trying to find out and whether it's not completely finished yet, that kind of thing. And I just wondered, Lydia, do you feel as though you've resolved what you feel like you were trying to explore through this, or is it sort of a continuum of many other things that you're still trying to figure out? Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I think it's a good question. I think both. I think in many ways, the fact that I can speak about this stuff is a real clear indicator, because a lot of this stuff I couldn't speak about for years. I think the fact that I can speak about it really does speak to the fact that I have really, you know, I could look at it and just go, yeah, that's what it was a long time ago. This is where it came from. So I think in many ways, yes. I also think that I'm still working on other things. It's interesting. I'm doing a whole different series right now. Like I'm doing a series that is, they're kind of, I'm calling it Hidden Forest, and I'm pushing the models like deeper into the woods. Like they're being entwined by all these leaves and flowers and things. And I'm mixing it's akin to going deeper into the psyche. Like I feel like with every series, with every year, I get deeper into my own psyche, and I really understand my background, where I come from deeper. And I mean, really, I know, really, I understand myself like to the nth degree. It's fascinating, and it's fascinating, and I feel like it's one of those acts that you do. The more you understand yourself, like the more you understand the world, and sort of the better person you become. I feel like you come out there with an AR-57 or AK, whatever you call those things, AK-67, whatever those guns are, and you go around to a protest where people are protesting things that they think are bad, and you bring a gun to this protest and you kill someone in self-defense, huh? Like maybe think about this a little bit. I think the more you understand, it seems to me it was the act of a child who didn't really know what he was doing. And I think like learning yourself, like really understanding where you're coming from is a way to kind of, just make you a more respectful person of like everybody else, because the more you understand you, the more you understand everybody, everything. So I forget actually where I was taking this conversation now, but so anyway, I forget where I was taking this, but back to this new series I'm doing, I'm connecting them with these still lifes that I'm doing of flowers. And the flowers almost feel like they're in a dream, like they're kind of floating. They're in this dark, dark background. And I'm connecting the two in a way they feel so like regenerative. And I think that's really at some level a state, like a reflection of like where I'm coming from, how things feel so regenerative. Or regenerated in a lot of ways. So, I don't know, I'm guessing you expect to see more flowers in my work. I don't know.
Thank you. I mean, I guess I was just curious because I think everyone has different subject matter things that they're working on. And sometimes, for your work, like, as you mentioned, it's very personal. I relate to that. I won't go into it, but I understand it. And I guess I was very curious about that continuum where a person may progress from one series to another, and maybe in some ways, not only do they unfold themselves, but they also do an unfolding for this subject, which is why there's this perhaps almost a cathartic experience that you have together. So it interests me, and I think.
Oh, for sure.
Really,
oh, for sure. I mean, that's how I see my work. I see it as this long line of like progressions, and each one is sort of exploring like a slightly different topic. And it is cathartic. It's incredible. Like I feel so lucky to be able to do this every day. It's like, wow, like who gets to do this? It's like, wow.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you for your honesty about it. Thanks.
Jackson had a couple of questions for you. First was, do you crop your images or shoot full frame? And secondly, how do you find your subjects?
I don't crop anything. I never crop. For me, the fun is the framing in the camera. Like that is thrilling. It's like thrilling to see something come together in the camera. So I never crop. I don't. In fact, even if it's not right, I'm like, no, this is the way I saw it. This was my experience, and this is, even though obviously I picked the right one too. I mean, I'm editing, so I'm clearly picking the one I want. So I never. What was the second part of the question?
How do you find your subjects?
Yeah, that's been an evolution too. In the beginning, like way back, first it was my children, and then in the Mark of Abel, it was all people I knew. Some of them were friends, some of them were friends' friends, some of them were friends' kids. They are still, I'm photographing a lot of the same people. I know a lot of these people for so long now, but I also am now getting like word of mouth, because some people have moved out of the area. And so I'm photographing some people, and then I'm like, they're like, they'll say to me, do you want anyone else? Because like my sister would love to pose for you, or my girlfriend would love to pose for you. So it's kind of at this point starting to be a little word of mouth. It's partially people I know, partially people who've been recommended to me. It's all people who live, really not more than 45 minutes away though, because I do this all on my farm. And that, I think that's a really important, like, because I do it on this land, it's partially about how the land feels to me, like the freedom that the land gives me, like, and it's also, I channel so much of my past, because I'm here. It's so easy to channel. It's really kind of on some level easy to, there's a certain comfort level to being here, but that comfort level lends itself to my bringing up uncomfortable feelings. And so I think it's actually a really nice balance that way.
And what's the best way for people to order your book, Lydia?
Oh yeah, right on my website. If you just go to lydiapanas.com and under books, it's the first book. And yet they should be here like within, I'm thinking 10 days at the latest. I should be able to send them out. Oh yeah, it's lydiapanas.com. You look under at the top of the thing at books, and then it's the first book. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lydia.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Kathy, we're going to pass it off to you.
So let's stop share. Did I stop it?
Yep.
And you guys can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi, thank you for letting me come to Book Talk. First of all, I just want to thank Lydia. That was a wonderful presentation, and I loved your work, so I've loved hearing a bit more about it. So thanks for letting me join you on this Book Talk and hear your presentation too. I'm excited to see your book. I'm also, Michael, thank you for having me on Book Talk today. I love these series, and I'm excited to be a part of it. So I'm going to share my screen real quick here. And I'm here today to tell you guys a little bit about my book called Holding Time. And I think that Holding Time is really a love story about family. The photos in Holding Time are my family, but I do think that they relate to just about every family, no matter what kind of family you come from. So before I talk about the book, I just wanted to give you a little inspiration for where the images from Holding Time came from and where the series came from. My father, who is now 84, every Christmas, he would drag out his box of slides, a couple boxes of slides. He took these slides in the mid-50s to about probably the mid-60s, from the time he was 15, which is in this picture, till he was about in his early 20s when he started having kids. And every Christmas, he would break out the old 1940 projector, and that's the actual projector right there, where he would manually turn the slides. And if you left the slides in there too long, they would melt, and get the screen out. And any relatives that were around, they would all tell stories about our family. And for me, and for our family, it became a really important tradition. My family moved a lot when I was younger, and doing this sort of a holiday Christmas story time, we may have rolled our eyes about it when we were teenagers, but it became an important way to make every place we were a home. Even if, we heard stories about our family, and it ended up being stories about all the family. And it just was it's a very cool tradition that we've kept up to this day. About 6 years ago now, I did an Instagram 365 where I took a photo every day based on a word or a phrase as part of a group. And the particular day that I was taking the photo, the phrase was "from where I stand." And I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I went over to my mom's house that day, and she had the box of slides out. And I pulled out one slide, this one, And it is of my mom when she was probably about 16. And it's at Newborough Lake in Ontario, Canada. It's a place that my family has been going for about 100 years, literally. And we still go every year. It's a really, again, another really important tradition in my family. And I thought, I live in Jamestown, New York now, which is in Western New York State. And I live on a lake called Chautauqua Lake. And when I was holding the slide up to the light, looking at it, I just thought to myself, I wonder if there's something I could do with our lake. I really had no specific plan in mind. So I went down to Chautauqua Lake and I took a lot of pictures, and this is just a few of them. And I started moving the slide around, and I not quickly, but I did realize all of a sudden that the background of my current landscape melded almost seamlessly with the slide from my past. And it was sort of an aha moment for me where I thought, you know your past, you know your loved ones, you know your relatives are all around you, that sort of presence of your past is always in your present. But this was really a physical way for me to see the two melding together into one. And I showed it to my mom, and she thought it was kind of a cool idea. And I wasn't really sure if I could do it with other slides, but I thought, well, I'm just going to start trying. So I started taking these little slides that my dad cherishes so much and putting them in my current environment. So some of them are taken in my home right now. Some are taken in the area that I live in. This is a restaurant that I go to all the time with my family now. And that's my grandfather in that photo. And sometimes they're just in my backyard. And this is me probably 5 years old in a pool in California. And this is my pool in my backyard. And I just realized that there was something to this series. It spoke to me, but when I showed pictures to other people, it brought up memories for them of their own childhood or their own parents or a vacation or a road trip or something, really cool that happened. And a lot of my work is about memory and sense of place and that type of thing. And this series sort of puts those two things together for me. About halfway through the series, I saw this quote by Lou L'Amour: "No memory is ever alone. It's at the end of a trail of memories, a dozen trails that each have their own associations." And the series name is No Memory is Ever Alone. That's where I got my series name from. And it just, I realized that there was more to this that I wanted to say than just the images. And I had enough images that told a story that I wanted to do a book. And so why a book? I am a huge book lover. I collect photography books. I love to see that physical manifestation of a story and hold it in my hands and smell it. And I knew with this series, I really wanted a book. I felt that there was a story to be told with the images, but I also wanted to include a text story too, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So I approached a few publishers and I talked to Jennifer Yaffe at Yaffe Press, and I loved her books. I had seen a lot of her books. And I also, probably more importantly, I'm a bit of I stalked her a little bit, so she's on this call, but I love the way that she thinks about artists and decides how to help them best put together a book that really says what the work is in your own unique way. And I really wanted that with this. I had a vision for what I wanted, and I knew I would be in good hands with Jennifer. And if you haven't read these two books, you should, because she has a very interesting way of looking at how to promote artists' work and things. And they're great books to have in your thing. This is one of my images, Sunday dinner. This is my family, my father's family at Sunday dinner, but this one has been a very popular image, I think, just because everybody can think about gatherings. And when I was thinking about the book, I wanted it to be intimate. It's only, I think it's 7 by 9. I wanted it to feel like someone's almost journal or photo album looking back through it. and thinking about their life and their family. You know, you always have the brother who has to be at dinner, who, I mean, everybody who looks at these sees something different, who has to make a funny face and ruin the photo and the family photo. You have the aunt and uncle that maybe drink a little too much and embarrass everybody. I think when people look at these, I found that they seem to see their own family stories in them. This is my great grandparents. And, you know, I never met them. I've heard all about them and their personalities, but when other people look at this, they see their immigrant family that came over from Italy. Or I have a friend who says, I swear my grandmother has that exact same dress, floral dress, that it matches the couch, you know? So when I was doing this book, these images are very personal to me and to my family story, but I really feel like it's every family story. Some of you will find something in this story that you'll have a minute to think back on, maybe a good memory from your family. Part of what I saw with this book was text, but I didn't want a typical text of maybe an essay at the beginning, or we talked about poetry, Jennifer and I had really seen something where I wanted it to be a through line through the whole book, sort of like somebody looking back on their life and reminiscing to some extent, some sort of like fragments of memory, just like these little slides are fragments of memory. I wanted the words to go with that. And luckily, Jennifer, I not know, she can probably say, didn't know what I thought I was going to do, but I had a writer who did a feature on my No Memories Ever Alone for D Magazine for La Repubblica in Italy. And her name is Irene Allison. And we Zoomed about this article and we sort of hit it off. And she loved my images and really got them. And I asked her to write for the book. And the best way I can describe it is lyrical nonfiction. It's a combination of my family, her family, the universal family. She wrote it from the perspective of a woman looking back on her life, or a man looking back, or a child. And there are these fragments, and it doesn't go with every image. It's paced throughout the book, but it's a through story. And she did such an amazing job at tying my images with her words and creating this sort of special, I just feel like it's a little jewel of a book about family and the love of family and everything that, you know, you care about with family. And I think it doesn't really matter what type of family you come from. We all have very similar experiences. Just the fact that I used a writer from Italy and she wrote it in Italian and we had to translate it into English, you know, she got it. And I just think that I'm hoping that when you see Holding Time and you read the book, that you'll feel like you're reminiscing about family, and it'll bring back memories of your own family. I'm going to read just one thing she wrote, just so you can get an idea. This is a picture of my father, obviously, but I'm just going to read the one thing. Early in the morning, my father talked to the trees. In the bustling silence of the forest, there was only the sound of his footsteps on the dead leaves and the rhythmic panting of his dog. And then he would greet them one by one, the young and the old, the larch with wrinkled barks, and the fir trees with the rough trunks, course on his hand, those he had seen grown and those who would remain after him. So she just did a really wonderful job. It was exactly what I was looking for. And I know sometimes photographers feel like they don't want words next to their photos for whatever reason. I think it depends on the project, but I feel like in this case, it really made it a much more cohesive project. And I'm like super happy with the way that turned out. Mine's shorter than Lydia's, so we'll have more time for questions and answers. But right now my book is on press in the Netherlands. So I don't have a physical book to show you guys at this point, but it is available for pre-sale at yaffepress.com/holdingtime. And I'm also on Instagram. I am going to be doing a pre-sale in January. We're hoping the book is coming in February or March, depending on COVID and some of the things that are going on with shipping and that type of thing. but I am having a pre-sale, and you can follow me on Instagram at Panebianco Photos. And I'll be offering some special prints with the books and some kind of cool nostalgic packages that go along with the books, because I love the fact that it's sort of a vintage feel. When Jennifer and I worked on the design of the book, we were really careful to keep it clean, but also harken back to sort of that feeling of Kodak and the slides. So I really want to thank the SC Center for Photography for inviting me to do this, and also all of you for listening. I noticed some people that I recognize the names, and I thank you for coming, and I thank those that I don't know to listen, and I appreciate your time.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy. Anybody have anything for Kathy?
I have just one question. It's not about the book. It's about your last name. Is that white bread?
Yes, it is.
All right. All
First thing my
right.
husband told me was white bread.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I did enjoy your photos, and I like the pairings that you make, with the current and historical photographs, basically. So it's really, really nice, I thought.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it, Kathy.
Thank you, Daryl. I appreciate that. I am too. I'm really thrilled about it. I mean, I loved working with Yaffe Press. I loved the idea of just creating this little piece that sort of ties everything together into a story. I mean, memory to me is definitely it's fleeting. Sometimes you have like really strong memories, and sometimes it's fragments of memories. But I feel like these slides, I don't want to get too woo-woo, but I feel like these slides are little spirits, and it sort of reminds you that your loved ones are still always around you. It doesn't matter if they're physically here or not. There's still this sort of melding of past and presence, and these images sort of remind you that they're always around you, and they're part of your present. Your past does meld into your present.
What
Yeah,
a nice segue from my work, right?
Yeah, I have another question. What type of synergy did you get? Was there between you and the bookmaker, and how much did they work with you? What was the process, basically?
Yeah, a lot. Jennifer's really, Yaffe Press is really known for collaborating with their artists. So from the very beginning, we really worked like this together. She's very strong on the design part of it. So, but everything, I mean, I will tell you that Jennifer came up with the title for this, Holding Time. I was like real hepped on, it has to be No Memory Is Ever Alone. And she was like, and she was right. I mean, it completely makes sense. But she's involved in every part of the process. I don't know, I've never done another book, so I'm not sure if that's the case with other publishers, but she is very collaborative and listens to the artist. And I mean, really, she didn't know what I was going to do with the text, I don't think. And she just let me do it and really saw it when it was done. So there's a lot of trust, I think, she puts into the artists. But I've never been through this process before. So it was really helpful to have Jennifer's knowledge and the ability to help me when I wasn't sure what I needed to do.
And
She's very hands-on.
And where's she located? Was this a long distance collaboration? Or?
Yes, she's in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, she's in Georgia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. She was on, but I know she had to get off at 3, so I don't know what time it is, unfortunately. But
It's after 3 now.
yeah, she had to get off the call at 3. or she could answer the question. But yeah, everything we've done is through phone or Zoom. So, but it still was very intimate. I mean, she really is highly involved in the process.
And what's the addition on a number on your book? I mean, how many?
500.
500.
Yes.
Is that the minimum that she does?
No, I think she's done less than that, but I wouldn't want to speak for her, but I feel like she may have done like 250, but I'm not sure.
And are these offset, or are they inkjet, or what's the?
No, they're offset. Yeah, right now it's
Yeah.
being printed in the Netherlands. Oh, yeah.
Okay, very good. Thanks for the info.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I know it's been a really interesting process, the bookmaking process. That is something that I had no idea the amount of work that it would be. And it's good work, you know, and I love the creative process of it. And there's the promotional, and there's all this different parts to it. But it is a much it's much more, it's difficult, but really interesting too. But it does help to have a good publisher to help you through.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have a couple of questions, and they're probably related to what Jim maybe was going to ask, because his question is related to what I was going to ask. So I just wondered what the turnaround time was between, you know, like the first starting point when you decided to do a book, and how long it took for, say, the design, and I guess you sort of evolved with the text and that sort of thing. And then also how you arrived, because when you have text, it changes the page count and that kind of thing. How did it affect those kinds of decisions, Kathy?
Yeah, so gosh, I'm trying to remember when we started this. It's actually, Jennifer's a fairly quick process, you know what I mean? I think compared to some, I think I started, I'm looking at my calendar, like in last January. And originally this book was supposed to come out in September, but we had some, on my end, some things with the text part of it, because of course it was in Italian and we had to have it translated. And that was a whole other thing that held up some stuff.
You mean the text, actually originally all the text that came to you was in Italian?
Yeah, she speaks English, but she writes in Italian.
And
so
there was no Italian then, I guess.
I don't know Italian, but we had a translator who was very good. And then we sort of tweaked it for English too, you know what I mean? Because it didn't quite fit. Yeah, so the actual beginnings when we came up with the name, and that was very quick, within months. And then probably the design part of it, that went fairly quickly too. She has a graphic designer that's very good, and he named Tucker, and he again, it was sort of a back and forth, you know what I mean, in terms of showing things and you sort of going back and forth and deciding whether you liked it. Do you like the fonts? Do you like the colors? We did a whole sequencing of the images, which Jennifer helped with. And then there was a holdup with the text, and then they needed the text obviously for the page count. And so once the text came in, I also let Irene, the writer, know approximately how much text I needed. Like I had a pretty good idea. So it was pretty close once it came back. We didn't have a lot of difference, because they do have to be in pages of 12. So it was actually too bad, but it's been at least maybe a year and a half, I would say. With some
January 2020 to about, got it. Okay.
Yeah, maybe like middle of, I can't remember exactly when we started at this point. It's sort of all blurred together, but Jennifer probably would remember. But it's been a fairly quick process. Probably the slowest part was the text. That slowed it down.
And did you make the image choice, or did you pretty much collaborate on that as well? Or
no, we collaborated on that too. What Jennifer does is she asks you to send all the images, any images from the series, and then she gives you some idea of what the sequencing what she thinks. I think she prints them all up, puts them out, and plays with them for a while till she sees something, and then she'll tell you, this is what I'm thinking. And then you have time to look at it and go, yeah, I like that. Don't like this. A couple images got thrown out, that type of thing. And then you go back to her. I went back to her and I told her what I liked, and then she came back, and then we pretty quickly agreed, though. It wasn't too bad, but there was definitely collaboration back and forth. But she did the original sequencing, and then for mine, and then I had a chance to sort of tweak.
I just wanted to mention that over time, I remember when I first saw now I realize one of your images, and then over time I'd be like, this is that same person. It must be that same person. And so it's really nice to, meet you.
Yeah, it is. I know. I appreciate that.
The backstory of it, because sometimes there's this slow recognition or realization of a person's work. It's nice that it's something that one would actually recognize that it's, different enough. And so both speakers today sort of have that quality, which is really great. So yeah, in their work.
Thank you. That's nice of you to say. I mean, it's been such a great project. And I always say this, my father, who's 83, thinks he's a rock star now. He's pretty sure that he's a celebrity somehow. Which is fine. He can feel that way. There are his slides.
So,
Full family, so that's really nice. Sorry, I'll be quiet.
No, that's okay.
No, I was just going to say, it actually it's an interesting homage to family, which is kind of what both you and Lydia in a way have sort of done regarding whether it's literal or not. But yeah, so it's very interesting in that regard. Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
So excuse me, I've got another question. One of the things that fascinates me is, for example, if you look at what the photo on your cover, so the slide was made years ago, and so you're going through the slides and you say, okay, I've got a pool in the backyard, so you pair those up. You make the current picture, but there surely must have been slides where you didn't have something immediately in mind and you had to go out and find something that would work with what you're doing. Could you tell us about that process?
Yeah, that's why it took me 5 years.
Yeah.
Because some of them, like you said, like this one of me in the pool, were easier than others. I had a pretty quick thought, but I tried with the ones that I tried a lot of slides that didn't work at all. They just didn't work for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And but I really tried to find something. I did try not to just go around and find anything that would go with the background. I tried to find something that was personal to me too, so that it wasn't just, someplace in my town that I drove by or something. There's one of my, I don't have the photo in this thing, but there's one of my moms sitting in a field, and the field is where my parents live now, you know what I mean, in this town. So and she loved that field. My mom passed away a few years ago. So yeah. And sometimes I try a background and I think I like it, and I go back and I go, oh no, that's not working. But definitely I try to be I can't really photograph. It's sort of like Lydia in that respect. Like it has to be personal. I have to feel a personal connection somehow. And the slides are obviously personal, but I wanted the backgrounds to be personal too. And like I said, he's got a ton more slides that I didn't use because they just didn't work. I couldn't find something, or and I was lucky. My dad was learning when he was taking these slides. So a lot of them are like overexposed. So that really helps for you to see through them. The lighter they are, the better it is to be able to get it in the background, to see the background too. And some of my images, you don't see as much of the background. It just depended, but I'm like Lydia, it has to be personal.
Very good, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, guess we'll wrap it up there for today. Thank you both, Kathy and Lydia, for joining us, and thanks to all of you that came by today for a bit. We will have links to both books on our BookTalk page on the website, so you can track them down and enjoy them. We're going to take a break in December, but be back in January. January 15th, we'll be back.
What, Michael, will that be for the artist talk also?
Yeah, we're taking a break in December for artist talk too.
Okay, great.
So everybody have a good holidays, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks a lot.
you.
And thanks, Michael, for having us.
Thank you,
Oh,
Michael.
Thank you. Thanks.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yep. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.